Shalom, shalom, everybody. Praise Yahweh. We can continue reading his word together, and we're going to get straight into it with Shophetim, or Judges 11, and look at a great example that we can learn from in the life of Yehudah. Okay.
And Yehudah the Gileadite was a mighty brave one, but he was the son of a whore. And Gilead brought forth Yehudah. And the wife of Gilead bore sons. And when his wife's sons grew up, they drove Yehudah out and said to him, You shall not have an inheritance in the house of our father, for you are the son of another woman. And Yehudah fled from his brothers and dwelt in the land of Tov. And worthless men banded together with Yehudah and went out with him. And it came to be some time later that the children of Ammon fought against Israel. And it came to be when the children of Ammon fought against Israel, that the elders of Gilead went to bring Yehudah out of the land of Tov. And they said to Yehudah, Come, and you shall be our commander, and let us fight against the children of Ammon. But Yehudah said to the elders of Gilead, Did you not hate me and drive me from my father's house? Why have you come to me now when you are in trouble? And the elders of Gilead said to Yehudah, That is the reason we have turned to you, that you shall go with us and be our head over all the inhabitants. That is the reason we have turned to you, that you shall go with us and fight against the children of Ammon and be our head over all the inhabitants of Gilead. And Yehudah said to the elders of Gilead, If you take me back home to fight against the children of Ammon, and Yahweh gives them to me, am I to be your head? And the elders of Gilead said to Yehudah, Yahweh is witness between us, if we do not do according to your words. Then Yehudah went with the elders of Gilead, and the people set him over them, as head and commander. And Yehudah spoke all his words before Yahweh in Mitzpah. And Yehudah sent messengers to the sovereign of the children of Ammon, saying, What is between you and me, that you have come to fight against me in my land? And the sovereign of the children of Ammon said to the messengers of Yehudah, Because Israel took my land when they came up out of Mitzrayim, from the Arnon as far as the Yabok, and to the Yarden, and now give back those lands in peace. But Yehudah again sent messengers to the sovereign of the children of Ammon, and said to them, This is what Yehudah said. Israel did not take the land of Moab, nor the land of the children of Ammon. For when they came up from Mitzrayim, and Israel walked through the wilderness as far as the Sea of Reeds, and came to Kadesh, then Israel sent messengers to the sovereign of Edom, saying, Please let me pass over through your land. But the sovereign of Edom would not listen, and they also sent to the messengers of Moab, but he refused. So Israel stayed at Kadesh. To the sovereign of Moab. Sorry, there's a fly flying around. It's distracting me. And they also sent to the sovereign of Moab, but he refused, so Israel stayed at Kadesh. Then they went through the wilderness and around the land of Edom and the land of Moab, and came to the east side of the land of Moab, and encamped beyond Arnon. But they did not enter the border of Moab, for Arnon was the border of Moab. And Israel sent messengers to Sihon, sovereign of the Amorites, sovereign of Heshbon, and Israel said to him, Please let us pass over through your land into our place. But Sihon did not trust Israel to pass over through his border, and Sihon gathered all his people together, and they encamped at Yahatz and fought against Israel. And Yahweh Elohim of Israel gave Sihon and all his people into the hand of Israel, and they struck them. So Israel took possession of all the land of the Amorites, the inhabitants of that land. Thus they took possession of all the border of the Amorites, from Arnon to the Yabok, and from the wilderness to the Yarden. And now Yahweh Elohim of Israel has driven out the Amorites from before his people Israel. Should you then possess it? Whatever Chemosh your mighty one gives you to possess, do you not possess it? And all that which Yahweh our Elohim takes possession of before us, we possess. And now are you any better than Balak, son of Zippor, sovereign of Moab? Did he ever strive against Israel? Did he ever fight against them? While Israel dwelt in Heshbon and its villages, and in Aroer and its villages, and in all the cities along the banks of Arnon, for 300 years, why did you not recover them within that time? So I have not sinned against you, but you are doing me evil by fighting against me. Let Yahweh the judge today between the children of Israel and the children of Ammon. But the sovereign of the children of Ammon did not listen to the words of Yehudah, words which Yehudah sent him. And the spirit of Yahweh came upon Yehudah, and he passed through Gilad and Manasseh, and passed through Mitzpeh of Gilad, And from Mitzpeh of Gilad he passed on toward the children of Ammon. And Yehudah made a vow to Yahweh, and said, If you give the children of Ammon into my hands, then it shall be that whatever comes out of the doors of my house to meet me, when I return in peace from the children of Ammon, shall belong to Yahweh, and I shall offer it up as an ascending offering. Yehudah then passed on toward the children of Ammon to fight against them, and Yahweh gave them into his hands. And he struck them from Aroer as far as Minith, 20 cities, and to Avel Keramim, and a very great slaughter. Thus the children of Ammon were humbled before the children of Israel.
Read to the end of the chapter.
Okay. And Yehudah came to his house at Mitzpah, and saw his daughter coming out to meet him with timbrels and dancing. Now except for her he had neither son nor daughter. And it came to be, when he saw her, that he tore his garments and said, O my daughter, you have brought me very low, and you are among those who trouble me. And I have given my word to Yahweh, and I am unable to turn back. And she said to him, My father, if you have given your word to Yahweh, do to me according to what has gone out of your mouth. Because Yahweh has taken vengeance for you upon your enemies, the children of Ammon. And she said to her father, Let this be done for me. Let me alone for 2 new moons, and let me go and wander on the mountains, and bewail my maidenhood, my friends and I. Then he said, Go. And he sent her away for 2 new moons, and she went with her friends, and bewailed her maidenhood on the mountains. And it came to be at the end of the 2 new moons that she returned to her father, and he did to her as he had vowed, and she knew no man. And it became a statute in Israel, that the daughters of Israel went every year for 4 days to honor the daughter of Yehudah the Gileadite.
Okay, so we're reading this passage in line with what we went through in the Torah portion this morning in terms of Israel going through the wilderness and seeking to go through the area of Edom and not being allowed, and then Sihon coming out against them and what Yahweh did. So Yehudah gives a little bit of history there. But one of the main things that we learn from the example of Yehudah is keeping one's word and being committed to doing what you've committed to Yahweh to do. You know, Mishle 18 verse 21 says, Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those loving it eat its fruit. So it makes it clear in this parable that what comes forth from your mouth is really what's going to be evidence of the produce of your life. And we're not told here whether the fruit in this parable is good or bad, but it goes either way, because whether it's death or whether it's life, the fruit of that is going to be loved by those eating it. So people love to just be speaking death over things, and they will consume themselves with that. But we are to realize the power of our words. That's really what the parable is highlighting here. And we should be on guard against keeping company with continually breaks down or speaks death or speaks curse over one's life, because it will affect you, you know. And we see that the reference of those loving it is a reference to those who love to talk and express their opinions when others like to hear them or not. It's another example of that, where people, you'll just have to eat what I'm telling you, whether you like it or not. And we must understand how important it is for us to guard the company and conversation that we engage in, and or that we are administering to, because it's very important. Colossians says, let your speech be seasoned with salt. So we should always make sure that what we are speaking from our mouths is fitting for the bride of Messiah. Now, when we look at this Torah or this portion in line with what we're looking at today in Bamidbar 19, 20, and 21, and then coming to the story of Yehudah, we learn some wonderful lessons of a man that presented himself as a good witness for us in Scripture, as one who is a mighty warrior, a brave, belief-fighting warrior of Elohim, that despite what others would say about him, his belief in Yahweh never faded. You know, the name of Yehudah means he opens, and comes from the root word pathach, which means open, allow, break forth, set free. And we're able to recognize that by the record of his actions that we're given here in this chapter, is that he was one that was used by Yahweh to open up the truth of Yahweh and set free a people who were very afraid of their enemies around them. Yehudah is one of those that are actually mentioned in Ivrim 11 as representing one who gives a great witness to us of containing the correct belief in Yahweh. And we need to realize that we're not only told that he was a mighty brave one, or mighty or brave one, but introduction to Yiftach that we get in scripture, son of a whore. Maybe not the best kind of introduction most people would like to get. Brave son of a whore. You'd kind of just say brave, like most people would want. But it was, maybe not something that he would like to have been remembered by, but it doesn't matter. He couldn't control who his parents were. But what he could be in control with is who he is in Yahweh. And that's a lesson for us all. We should not put ourselves down in being inadequate in serving Yahweh because of where we think we've come from. But it's what Yahweh has called us to is what matters, and how we embrace that and the responsibility of that. His father was Gilad, who was the grandson of Manasseh, who was the great-grandson of Yosef. So just to give you a bit of highlight here, you got a man that was from the line of Yosef. He was born out of a relationship with his dad had with a whore, and he was rejected by his half-brothers, who told him that he had no part in the family inheritance. It caused him to flee from his brothers. He goes away and he joins himself, or worthless men joined themselves to him, and off he was away from his brothers and thinking about what their families are going to do, and life carries on. So he's away from Israel. Then Israel find themselves under threat of the Ammonites. And they were under threat of the Ammonites because of their lack of obedience before Yahweh. They were, through their own disobedience, finding themselves with breaches in their defenses, with the enemies closing in. And they cry out to Yahweh, who told him to go and cry out to the mighty ones that they've been serving, see if they'll listen. You'd chosen other mighty ones in your disobedience. Now you want victory. Now you want to come to me. And Israel kept crying out to Yahweh, and Yahweh was grieved. Because I think this is what grieves the spirit of Elohim, when people are demanding stuff from him, but they're not willing to be obedient. Israel needed a strong leader to lead them, and they said that whoever would go and fight first would become their leader. Everyone among them was so afraid to take leadership. But you know what? We'll give a reward. Whoever wants to go out first, will be leader. Perhaps they learned from, we needed David to go against a Goliath again, and none of the elders of that time wanted to step up. None of them wanted. Now the elders were the way, they had rejected Yahweh because of their corrupted ways. And so now they're afraid to take any headship and say, okay, I'll go, because they know that the responsibility of this will come at a big price. Now Yiftach was the firstborn of Gilad. And although he was born he was a son of a whore, he was still the firstborn, and according to the Torah, he was supposed to receive a double portion of the inheritance over his brothers. His brothers rejected him. They twisted the Torah by telling him that he had no inheritance. So now, after being rejected by his own, the elders came and asked him to come back. So they find him and say, please come back. We need you. And he confirmed with them that, listen, if I did lead you, will you make me head over Gilad? In other words, it was like something that he wanted to restore properly, is that he has the right of firstborn, He was making sure that his rightful inheritance would be secured, not because he was looking for stuff, but it's about the right position that he should be acknowledged for, because that is Yahweh's way. Think about his half-brothers must have felt with all the elders of Israel going and calling this guy, and, the man that they had rejected, renounced, no part of us, get out, you're just, you're trash, we don't want you. Now they're returning home, and he's their captain and leader of this nation. This is pretty similar in type to Yosef, who was rejected by his brothers, only later to become the one who would facilitate their deliverance in a famine of the time. It took David himself 7 years to gain the full support of Israel, of all 12 tribes. I mean, it took a long time for them there was division from the days of Shaul between the two houses, and it took 7 years for him, and then he would go to Jerusalem. But he was sovereign in Hebron for 7 years, and so all of these events that we're talking about here shadow picture for us the wonderful work of our Master, who in the flesh of man was despised and rejected by his very own, and he became the sovereign and king of the armies of Yahweh, who is once again coming to destroy all of his enemies. This mighty brave one, Yehudah, might have been rejected by his own, was now being called back to lead the nation against the enemies, and here's a mighty man. Now, the Hebrew word for mighty is Gibor. You might know that as a contracted title of Elohim as El Gibor, El Almighty. Gibor means mighty man, valiant warrior, powerful. Sorry, what?
No, not the Almighty one.
El Shaddai, El Shaddai is almighty. El Gibor is strong El, yes. Mighty El. Now, Gibor comes from the word gavar, which means to be strong and prevail, which is what we've been called to do in the Master. We are to, when you are strong and prevailing, you're not giving up. And it's not like you're fighting a lost cause. When we learn from the life of Yehudah, here's a guy that didn't give up because his foundation in belief of Yahweh was secure. And here we see, here was a man that was strengthened in his relationship with Yahweh. And here was a man of might and of strength. The Hebrew word for strength, chayil, means strength, efficiency, wealth, ability, capability. So when we're told to be strong and courageous, Yahweh's calling for us. It's not that everybody has to be this powerful weightlifter because that's your strength. Your strength is your capability, your efficiency, your excellence. It carries more than just how much you can physically pick up. Bodily exercise is of some value, but strength goes beyond just the physical attribute of what man would determine is how strong you are. Yahweh sees how strong you are in how excellent you are being and how efficient you are being and how capable you are being with the very talents that he has entrusted into your life. Chayil comes from the word chil, which means to be firm, strong, to endure, and to prosper. This is the same word that's used and translated as able when Moshe was instructed by his father-in-law to search out able men to help lead the nation with him, And those who find strength in Elohim go from strength to strength and become capable and firm members of the body of Messiah. It's the Master that equips us to be strong. It's the Master who causes us to be a people that can stand firm in him. And I just want to touch on this word, chayil, today, to be able and to be brave. In the pictographic, it looks like this, where you've got a chit, a yot, and a lamet. Earlier today, we looked at we haven't looked at a chit yet. Chit is a picture of a tent wall. It represents separation. It divides that outside to inside. Also reminds us that as living stones, we are being built up in the Master as a spiritual house to offer spiritual slaughter offerings of praise. The yot is a picture of an arm and a hand. It speaks of function, what you do, the work of a hand, how you throw or how you make. The lamet we've looked at earlier, a shepherd's rod representing authority. So here we see a clear picture of, a true brave one are the ones who have been separated to work the good works of the shepherd. In other words, when our Master says, come out and be separate, touch not the unclean, and I will receive you, it takes bravery and courage to, in this world of compromise, to live a separated life that works the good works of our good shepherd. So we are established and separated to work under the authority of the good shepherd. That's what true, brave, able ones in the Master are. And so Yehudah took up his role as judge and leader. And we can see some powerful qualities that are displayed in his leadership here when he wasn't just this hot-headed guy who wanted to go look for a fight. Maybe his brothers thought, hey, we know him. Maybe he had a bit of characteristics they didn't like and think, we'll go call him. He'll be crazy enough to go and fight, stand ahead of the pack, But here wasn't a guy just, I want to pick a fight. He was a guy that went into the battle under complete belief in Yahweh and his knowledge of Yahweh. He first sought to resolve the issues, and what we see from this passage very clearly is that Yehudah knew the Torah of Yahweh. He knew the history of Israel, which shows he was one that spent time meditating on the word. and the journey of where Israel had come to this point. And having been now set up as commander, he starts off his campaign in prayer. In verse 11, we're told that he spoke all these words before Yahweh at Mitzpeh. This highlights a clear character of a complete, mighty, brave one in the master who knew where his strength came from. He didn't presume to be the big shot. Now I'm in charge. Now all listen to me. We're going out now. He sought Yahweh in prayer. Now, many might not have seen him in prayer because it's not really, we don't need to be showing people we're praying, but the confidence that you can display in leading others is not about whether they can see you praying or not. It's whether you are praying or not. You know? And it's a powerful lesson on seeking Yahweh and seeking first his reign and his kingdom. And after seeking Yahweh, he sends messengers to the sovereign of Ammon, asking him, why are you fighting with us? You know, I don't know how long. It'd been a while since the Ammonites were surrounding them. So maybe they thought, we're going to get our long lost brother that we didn't like before. We're going to get him, feed him to the wolves and see if we get somewhere. Maybe that was their thought. He comes, they're expecting somebody's going to fight for us. Think about when Messiah came in the flesh. They were all expecting the Messiah to come and destroy all the Greeks and the Romans and say, now we're here. And now Yehudah prays. He sends messages to the enemy and says, why are you trying to fight? What's going on? The king of Ammon, he was only interested in taking Israel out. He wanted back what Israel had. When he says he wanted back, he never had it in the first place, but in his own assumption, he wanted what he reckons was stolen from them under Moshe's leadership. And in response to the king of Ammon, Yehudah presented 4 clear arguments to show and prove that his thoughts, the king of Ammon that is, were wrong. Now, one of the things that we see Yehudah doing very clearly was he presented the facts of history. And you can see that from verses 14 to 22. You can't deny facts. And when you want to present the truth to people, you need to present the word. We present the truth. When we present the truth, we understand that over time, like in the days of Yehudah, over time, man corrupts that truth to suit their own whims. By adding and taking away, you can't do that, because when you do that, you deny the power and strength and witness of who our master is. And through the facts of history, it was made clear to us today that we've been lied to. We just have to look back at our history. When Yirmiyahu says, in the last days, the nations will come and say, our fathers inherited lies. We're sitting here today. We're going into this season where people are following lies, and we've got a history to show where these lies came from. But most people don't want to listen. They rather want to listen to the father of lies than listen to the one who is the truth. Yehudah reminds the Ammonites that Moshe and the leaders of Israel asked for a safe passage through their territory, which was refused, and this led to war, where Yahweh gave Israel the victory. Israel didn't steal land. They captured it under the leadership of Yahweh, their mighty one. And besides that, the Amorites actually had taken the land from the Moabites. Therefore, their claim that the land was theirs was actually invalid. Yehudah knew this history, and he knew the history of the land where they were dwelling. And this is what made him a great leader too. He was learned in the Torah. He knew the history of Israel. He understood and knew the facts. And this is a very clear quality that Shaul reckons as being critical to Timotheus and Titus in any time appointing oversight. You know what? If you can't appoint a young believer, somebody that doesn't know the word, doesn't know the history, and expect them to lead people in victory, because they can get caught under falsehood. As we lead people in Messiah, we would do well to present ourselves as people that can rightly divide the truth, that can use proper discernment, because we are meditating on the word day and night. And you know what? It's one thing meditating on the Torah day and night so that we can distinguish between the clean and the unclean, the set apart and the profane, and then to know the history, because the prophets and the writings is history for us. And also the renewed writings, it's good history for us, because if we know that, That's when we can present the facts clearly and precisely, without the twisting that man has tried to do to people that actually aren't meditating on the truth. We need to know the history ourselves. We need to be able to present it as workmen approved, as Shaul tells Timotheus you shouldn't be ashamed. You should rightly handle the word of truth and do your utmost to do that before our master. Israel was given the land by Yahweh, and he makes it clear. He was careful. Yehuḍah was always careful in giving Yahweh the esteem for every victory that Israel had. Remembering to honor Yahweh, who fights for us and gives us the victory, is something that we should never let be lacking in our lives. It was common among the nations that when they would capture a territory, that they would claim that it was the will of their mighty one. That's how the nations proclaimed. That's why Yahweh said to them originally, go ask the mighty ones you've been serving to help you. Because he was trying to show them there are no other mighty ones, but that which you've chosen above me is nothing, but yet you want me to fight for you because they can't bring that deliverance. Dagon, the Philistines thought, would overcome when they captured the Ark of the Covenant. But they quickly realized that Yahweh had brought curses upon them, you know. Yahweh, the living Elohim, took the land, so it became Israel's land according to the covenants of promise. And what we can declare today is that it is Yahweh who gives us the victory. And we must realize and always recognize the praise that we are to give him, because he gives everything to us. And that's why we are to be proclaiming the proper praises, done so out of obedience. Israel had lived in the land for centuries. Look, it was already about 300 years that they'd been living in this area. So it's, and in the scheme of things, if we track back, not even, I just want to, we're in a horrible season of the world right now. Okay, so it's fitting that we mention this. Less than 200 years ago, Christmas was banned in America. It was banned. In fact, it wasn't even presented as this red-suited clown on a reindeer. It was some little green leprechaun in the past, or anyway, whatever that was about. But it was through a marketing campaign of Coca-Cola that they generated what is modern presentation of this rubbish season that we're in, you know. I don't even want to mention names of these things that are used. We all know what I'm talking about. But I want to highlight something. And not so long ago was this stuff utterly banned, you know. You weren't allowed to set up trees in your house, which Israel were doing many centuries before. Yirmiyahu 10 speaks about cutting a tree of the forest, making it stand so it won't fall over, putting silver and gold on it. What's he talking about? An adopted custom of the nations that's now been adopted as a season of jolly when it's actually folly. You know, it's not jolly, it's folly. That's the way it should be. And I'm not trying to make a big joke of it because it's serious stuff. Israel had been in this land for 300 years. That's the point I want to get. And it shows you how quickly things can go south. Or history can be forgotten or shaped to whichever way the writer at the time wants to describe it. All of a sudden, the king of Ammon is claiming that where Israel are dwelling, it's theirs. I mean, they had no legal claim to it. When we think about the work that our master came to do in the flesh of man just over 2,000 years ago, and the promises that are secure in his blood, the enemy can't steal away what's been given to us. But what he can do is corrupt the history that keeps people from freedom. The Ammonites were actually fighting against Yahweh. That's the other point that Yehuḍah was making very clear here. Yehuḍah didn't declare war on Ammon. Ammon declared war on Yahweh. On Israel. If Yahweh had given the land to Israel, then Ammon coming against Israel, they were coming against Yahweh. Because that's what he was kind of saying to this guy. He says, when you get a land, don't you give praise to your mighty ones? Well, Yahweh, Elohim of Israel, gave us this land. So if you're coming against us, please know who you're coming against. It's a dreadful thing to fall into the hands of Yahweh, who judges both the living and the dead. So what we can see at this point, Yehuḍah, who is now leading Israel, presented himself very clearly as a man of courage and wisdom. He knew the Torah, he knew the history of the nation of Israel. He was brave and courageous to actually take the stand. A lot of people say, yeah, I know that says in the word, but I'm afraid to speak it. I know it says that in the word, but I can't tell them that. How are they going to? No, we got to learn. Here's a guy that's saying, hey, this is the facts. With what you're coming doesn't weigh up with the facts. So what are you bringing? But most people today who claim to be believers back down when they actually should stand up and proclaim the truth through the witness of their lives. And so it's at this point of the text where we see here, he didn't rely, Yahweh can choose anyone he wants, but he sees the heart of people. And it's not based on our past. As I said, the introduction of this man is like son of a whore. It's like, it doesn't matter where you've come from. It matters who you are in the master. And this is what we all sit from, because we've all sinned and fallen short of the esteem of Yahweh. But who we are in the Messiah, as the old is gone and new has come, we must take up that courage, take up that strength we have in the master, and go forward in great confidence, because that's when we can walk according to the Spirit. And it's at this point in the text that we see the Spirit of Yahweh came upon Yehudah. Why? Because he proved himself to operate as one who can rightly divide and handle the truth. Here was a vessel that Yahweh could put his Spirit upon. Yahweh is the one who qualifies and calls a person into service, not man. Filled with the Spirit of Yahweh, he was now ready to go forward in great confidence and boldness, not by power and might, but by the Spirit of Yahweh. Then he would go forward. Yehudah then makes a vow before Yahweh. So again, he's not afraid, but he's acknowledging he doesn't know exactly how things are going to pan out. He puts his trust in Yahweh, but he makes he makes a vow before Yahweh. Voluntarily, he says, you know what? If you bring victory for me today, it wasn't that he was doubting Yahweh, but he was showing his commitment. He says, whatever comes out my house, I give it to you. And this is where we see the power of this story, because that's why I wanted you to read to the end, because it really is about the words we speak. Do we keep our word or do we break our word? That is a big question for a lot of people today. Yehudah made a very serious commitment here. So many people might argue that this was a rash vow, it was stupid, yet we are told that the Spirit of Yahweh came upon him and he made a vow. So this was by the Spirit of Yahweh, stirring his heart, the confidence that he had. To make such a vow shows how much trust he put in Yahweh and how much belief he had in Yahweh. He wasn't under obligation. He didn't have to make a vow, but he did. And it was a conditional agreement. If you do this, then I'll do that. We know that Yahweh fulfilled his part. He always keeps his promises. And today there's a saying that says a verbal agreement isn't worth the paper that it's written on. Now that doesn't sound correct because verbal is not written, but that's the saying that goes about, because it becomes a norm to realize that no promise, whether verbal or written, has any value in these days. You can't really take people at their word anymore. That's kind of like the common stance in the world today. But here we see it highlights a lack of integrity. But here Yehudah displays for us true integrity. In the past, not so long ago, probably even less than 200 years ago, you would hear sayings written in history that could be, a man's word is his bond. In other words, you could take a man at his word, not even 50 years ago. But sadly, that's not the case today. And it should be the case within a bride of Messiah. If we make promises, we must keep them. Yahweh never breaks his word. 1 Kings 8 verse 56 says, blessed be Yahweh, who has given rest to his people Israel according to all that he promised. There has not failed one word of all his good word which he promised through his servant Moshe. Isn't that so wonderful? That we can even look at the history and we can meditate on these things and know that Yahweh is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Therefore, why should we doubt him now when clearly we've got historical evidence? Yehuddah's part of the Hall of Fame that we can be encouraged by, to be reminded of how people like me and you, put their belief in Yahweh and overcame. We need to make sure that we are keeping our word. And when the psalmist says, I pay my vows to Yahweh now in the presence of all his people, or I offer to you a voice of thanksgiving, I pay what I've vowed, deliverances of Yahweh, it's a declaration of saying, I can see your victory and see I'm committed. You know what a lot of people do? Similar to some of the brothers, half-brothers of Yehudah, probably having that kind of heart. When they were first crying out to Yahweh, I wasn't going to listen to them because they didn't have the proper leadership who was trusting in him fully. A lot of people say, Yahweh, please help, please help. Oh, yes, I'll do this when. And when happens, they forgot what they said they would do, conveniently. You know? Yiftach's vow was an extremely devastating commitment. How about today? How about the whatevers of our lives and the claims that we might often easily make, especially when in a desperate situation? Many might say things, whatever it takes, Yeshua Messiah, I'll follow you. Just please do this for me. And if you do this for me, I promise, I swear I'll do this. And when it happens, you forgot what you promised. Yiftach didn't forget his vow. You see, so many people forget their commitments. Now, we're talking about vows to Yahweh, but it should be the same standard by which we make commitments to one another. We must realize the power of our words and committing to a task must be fulfilled. I just want to read, because I always think about this. A lot of times people think, oh, but what happens now if Shlomo helps us a great deal in his parables? I want to see here. Okay, Mishle 6 is a wonderful little section that if you've in haste committed to something and suddenly find out for whatever circumstance you're not able to perform what you still eagerly would want to, but you can't. But now what do? You don't just ignore it and hope they forgot. Mishle 6, I'm just going to read from verse 1 to 5. It says, my son, if you have become guarantor for your friend, have shaken hands in pledge for a stranger, have been snared by the words of your own mouth, have been caught by the words of your mouth, do this at once, my son, and deliver yourself, for you have come into the hand of your friend. Go, humble yourself and urge your friend, give no sleep to your eyes, nor slumber to your eyelids. Deliver yourself like a gazelle from the hunter's hand and like a bird from the hand of the trapper. What he's saying is that sometimes you've maybe committed to something. Now you realize I'm not able to do it. Don't just shut up and think hopefully it'll go away. Immediately, don't give sleep to your eyes. Go and say to, go and say to somebody, I've said this, but I'm unable to do it. I'm really sorry. Can I maybe do it later? Or is there somebody else I can get for you? But don't just, a lot of people in the whim of a moment. Yes, I'll do this. Yes, I'll do that. How about any commitments or any, yes, somebody asks you something. Yes, I'll help you with that. And then a year goes by and you forgot to help them what you were supposed to do a week after that. Or, I'm just giving some practical things. How about when walking with Yahweh and things aren't going great? When Yahweh, when you really bring some breakthroughs, then I'll start doing this and I'll start doing that. And when the breakthroughs come, those things are forgotten. Yes, Jack.
I'm also just thinking about, it says here, worthless men bandaged with you.
Yes.
How many times when we have conversations with people, they put in the multitudes, but the multitude can't be wrong. Just put it oneself.
Yes.
And if they're not been as
Strong.
independent and strong and committed to the promises that he made to you. This is exactly the arguments that we hear.
Yes. The masses can't be wrong. Yeah. I think that his vow was a defining commitment, and it was a test of his commitment. Would he keep his word? Would he obey Yahweh? Yes. Was it just talk? No. Was he serious? Yes. I mean, these are things that sometimes we got to ask ourselves, or have we ever had people that have kind of not done what Yiftach did toward us? Or have we done what Yiftach definitely wouldn't do to others, if you understand what I mean? Not really. Yiftach shows what it means to keep one's word. That's really the lesson that we learn here. Ecclesiastes 5 verse 4 to 5 says, when you make a vow to Elohim, do not delay to pay it, because he does not take pleasure in fools. Pay that which you vowed. It is better not to vow than to vow and not pay. I said earlier, there is a saying. Here's another saying that says, He who is slow in making a promise is the most faithful in keeping it. Mishle 20 verse 25 says, it is a snare for man to say rashly, it is set apart, and only later to reconsider his vows. Now, what's the one thing that, well, there's many things, but one of the major things that cripples a lot of people is when it comes to their physical well-being and in terms of their stuff or their wealth or whatever it is. And it's a clear commitment. When I get this, Yahweh, I promise I'm going to do this. I just want to give a little, I mentioned it a while back to a guy when I do my gym stories at gym instead of exercising, but it was a true story. True story I told, of many years ago. There was a guy that came to his pastor at that stage, and he had no work, and he had been out of work for a long time, and he kept saying, when Yahweh gives me work, I'm going to put him first. I'm going to put him first. He said, that's great. And he carried on. Eventually he got a job, and I'm just going to use dollars. Okay. For ease of sounds more, I suppose. I don't know. Or sounds less. I don't know. So he earned himself $10. So he gave $1. Because look, it's not that, he should do it anyway, but he committed to being obedient to the word when Yahweh comes through for him with work. And so he was being obedient for a while, and then he started getting favor, and he got promoted, and then he started getting $100. So he gave his 10. And so over time, this was actually growing and growing and growing until he got 1,000, and then he was doing well. And this pastor had gone away or whatever, and this guy actually got to a stage after a number of years where he had his own business, and he was flourishing. And suddenly he had a turnover of $1 million, and he found it hard to write a check for $100,000. And it really weighed heavy on him because he thought, that's a lot of money in his fleshly mind saying to give away. So he sought out to find this guy that he made this commitment before. And he went to him and he said, listen, I want to share how things are going. It's been great, number of years since I've seen you, but I need to talk to you. Okay, great, come, sit. No, well, remember many years ago we were sitting and I said to you, this is what I'll do. And he said, yes, well, what's happening now? Oh, this is great to hear how your business is going. Oh, but can you pray? Can we be released from this vow, this commitment that I made with you? Because it's really hard. So this guy started praying, and it was maybe 20 minutes. He's sitting there and he's watching this guy and praying. And he thought, should I disturb him? So he said, what are you praying? Are you praying that I can be released? He says, no, I've been praying that Yahweh puts you back in the position where you'll be obedient again. He wasn't praying necessarily that you'll suddenly be this multi-millionaire. He's saying, well, if you can't do it when you're there, then be a good steward. Get back to the place where you are a good steward. And I think it is a true story, okay? But it's a lesson for us because it comes down to what sometimes people commit to in their desperation. And even in that desperation, the obedience should never waver, no matter how much. I mean, it wasn't, I will do if. We shouldn't have a conditional clause to Yahweh when we say we obey, because his word says do that. But it just is a lesson again on when we make a commitment that's outside of the boundaries of what's already required, we should be willing to follow through with that, showing as a witness before our master that we are truly his beloved bride that puts total and complete trust in him. We see here that we need to be ready to follow through regardless of circumstances. Whatever we commit to, we must be ready to follow through. Yehudah could have been so quick in turning around and saying, not for me. Could have come to his brother and said, okay, I see this. You know what, I'm not even in. It wasn't about the inheritance for him. It was about the fact that he could now bear witness of his identity in Messiah, that he isn't a rejected one, that he's a chosen one of Yahweh. Another thing we need to realize is that vows do not need to be vocalized in order to be in effect. As soon as we say it in our hearts, know that Yahweh already knows it and he expects it. And that's where Acts 5 comes in as a wonderful example for us with Hananiah and Shapira, who lied to the set-apart spirit. all because they wanted to put on a show before others. They didn't even have to bring anything. But they thought because Barnabas did something, they thought, well, we have to show better. But they lied about what they got, and they were struck dead. You can go and read about that in Acts 5, but I always use that as a great example because a lot of times people think, oh, these are Old Testament stories. Well, let's get to you want to use those terms, let's get to the New Testament and see here. Here's a clear witness. After the resurrection of Messiah, what takes place? The standard is the same. Yahweh looks at the heart. Man looks at the eyes. Shemuel Aleph tells us that. And so Hananiah and his wife were fools, trying to look wise and like the good ones before the eyes of many, but yet proven to be foolish. Yiftach's vow was twofold. He said, whatever comes out of his house. And this is where this text is also twisted by many people, because I'm going to offer to Yahweh. Now his daughter comes out. Now some people think that he offered his daughter in fire. Now here's a man, through the rest of the record that we have of him, is one that knew Yahweh. He knew his rights according to the Torah. He knew the history, so he knew exactly who Yahweh was. He wasn't one that was going to put his daughter through fire. I mean, that's against the Torah. So that's not even a consideration to be thought of. Yet some people teach, oh, look at this guy. How could he do that? He made a conditional clause that whatever comes out of his house, if it was an animal, it would have been given on the slaughter place. A clean animal, that is. But his daughter comes out, so his daughter is dedicated to Yahweh as a given one. And when she heard, here's another lesson we could speak on for hours again, of showing how his household was ruled well according to the word of Yahweh. Because she said, well, if you've committed to Yahweh, and showing her submission to the headship as head of the home in terms of what Yahweh authority and rulership of the house is, she says, whatever you've said, you must commit to. Just let me go spend a couple of months with my friends. And I like what Carlin did correctly is, you may have read it on the screen when it says that every year the daughters of Israel would go, and it says lament for Yiftach's daughter. The Hebrew word that's used there, certainly it's called tanah. The Hebrew word, which is not translated as lament, it should be celebrate, praise, rejoice. What did you say? Honor. Yeah. Commemorate, celebrate. So they would every year go and commemorate her belief in being committed to actually following Yahweh's word, So we need to realize that Yiftach was a guy that understood the Torah. He understood what it meant to make a commitment. And the other time, Tanah is only used twice in Scripture. The other time that it's used is in Shophetim 5, verse 11, when it says, by the voice of shouters between the places of drawing water, there they recount the righteous acts of Yahweh, the righteous acts of his leadership in Israel, and the people of Yahweh shall go down to the gates. These were part of the words that the song of Devorah and Barak sang after the victory they had when Yahweh gave the hand Sisera into their hand and destroyed the sovereign of Canaan. So we see here Tanah means recount, rehearse, celebrate, praise. So every year they would go and remember the commitment and the victory that was had, because it would always be a commemoration of the victory that Yahweh brought for Israel under the leadership of Yiftach, reminding them not to go to the ways of the nations and follow other mighty ones, but put their complete trust in Yahweh. So forever, her life as a daughter of belief in the Master would be a witness to the rest to say, don't be in disbelief. And the record that's given for us is a reminder for us of that we must make sure that as a body of Messiah, we don't, as some generations, just let things go haywire and fall away, but we retain from generation to generation that renewed covenant, that consistent service in the Master of set apartness, We're not given her name, hey? But it doesn't matter. It's like the unnamed girl that witnessed to Naaman. But she certainly is one that stands to serve as a witness alongside Yiftach, her father, in that Hebrews 11, when it says, oh, there's many more I could write to you about. Here's one here about great belief in the Master. putting complete trust that she wasn't just saying, oh, just because my dad said so. I mean, she also had a right. We don't know her age or whatever, but here's a clear commitment again, just as Shemuel was given when he was young, because that's what Hannah said, you know. We understand that this is a chapter that presents to us the victory of belief, true belief, belief obedience, and the victory that can be had in it, and the celebration that can continue when we stay in the belief, stay in the Master. Any thoughts on this passage? Yes.
In verse 37 and verse 38, the word bewailed is used. Bewail her maidenhood. Bewail her maidenhood.
Yes, bewail her maidenhood, because she wouldn't have a man and marry and have children. She would be given to Yahweh in service in the temple.
So maidenhood. Yeah, I understand that, but I'm just thinking of, if we say further down, when we say when we change the meaning of lament to honor and rejoicing and whatever, would that
No, what we're saying here, let's just go exactly to the words that I used. It's verse 37 and 38, eh?
Yeah.
Okay, so in verse 37, okay, it's bacha, which means to weep, bewail, cry, shed tears. So, but tana does not mean lament. That's what we're saying. So the last verse, it doesn't mean lament. It's an incorrect translation. That's the point. Bewail is to cry, to weep over. And she was like, hey, okay, I am going to weep the fact over my maidenhood, that this is now my lot, you know. So it's something, but it wasn't like, oh, like just, okay, let me go have 2 months to work out in my mind. This is what it's like with my friends. I'm not going to have children. I'm going to be in service to Yahweh now. And every year there would be a celebration of one that's actually given to Yahweh.
She was never going to marry and have children.
No.
Like everyone did.
Yes.
She was now going to be in full service
Yes.
as a maiden.
Yeah.
No.
So the correct translations is to bewail her maidenhood. She wasn't, oh no, I have to go there. It's like, okay, this is where my life's direction is now. So let me go. It's like, okay, I'm saying goodbye to, yeah. And every year they didn't bewail the fact that she was serving. They'd celebrate. I think that's the. Okay, let's see what Renee is saying. How is the celebrations commemoration that the daughters had different to other man-made celebrations since then? It's not a scriptural feast, but it's allowed. Well, they would go up and have 4 days of celebration. I mean, getting together and celebrating Yahweh, there's nothing wrong with that. As long as you don't break his appointed times, we are to rejoice daily. So, yeah, it's certainly, it's not a scriptural appointed time for everybody. Yes, you're right. But it is certainly allowed that we get together and we rejoice and commemorate. We can do that any day, you know. So it's not an appointed time of worship, but it's every year for 4 days. Obviously, maybe they came from far. So it's, hey, let's spend 4 days together. We just remember what's done, and we celebrate the fact that, because you know what this would do? There's a couple of things here, because it says from year to year the daughters would do it. So it would also be a reminder of everything that took place to get to that point, so as to guard against going after the mighty ones and seeing the enemy come against them and crying out to Yahweh, and Yahweh saying, go find your other mighty ones. So it's all about teaching about commitment. And then he says, but wouldn't people argue now that they are also just commemorating? There's a difference between there's a difference between setting apart Yahweh's appointed times and then practicing idolatrous witchcraft as a replacement for Yahweh's appointed times. So, yeah. So when people, I think I know where you're going at this time of year, yes, people are commemorating, but they are celebrating a festival of lawlessness and licentiousness.
You can't adopt pagan practices
No.
and then
No.
do that in commemoration.
Yeah, exactly. You don't adopt pagan practices and do that in commemoration. People say, yeah. I mean, I know what you're saying. Yes, we know he wasn't born at this time of year, but we're just commemorating. No, you're adopting pagan practices. Birthdays are the same thing. You know, you're using pagan adopted witchcraft practices that are supposedly protective rights over the one who's celebrating whatever, and try and use that in a form of celebration. That's corrupt idolatry. So just to differentiate, what the daughters did is not idolatry. It's just a bunch of daughters celebrating the fact that they can commemorate the victory that was had with Yehuḍah, with Yahweh through Yehuḍah, and his words that he committed, and his daughter actually showing a household that actually was not doing what the nations were doing, but were committed to Yahweh. So I hope that helps. Okay, let's get to Yehuḍah. Who's reading? Kayla.
It's the whole one.
The whole thing, and nothing but the whole thing.
Yehudah, a servant of Yahshua Messiah and brother of Yaakov, to those who are called, set apart by Elohim the Father, and preserved in Yahshua Messiah. Compassion and peace and love be increased to you. Beloved ones, making all haste to write to you concerning our common deliverance, I felt the necessity to write to you, urging you to earnestly contend for the belief which was once for all delivered to the set-apart ones. For certain men have slipped in, whose judgment was written about long ago, wicked ones perverting the favor of our Elohim for indecency, and denying the only Master Yahweh and our Master Yahshua Messiah. But I intend to remind you, though you once knew this, that Yahweh, having saved the people out of the land of Mitzrayim, afterward destroyed those who did not believe. And the messengers who did not keep their own principality, but left their own dwelling, he has kept in everlasting shackles under darkness for the judgment of the great day. Even as Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities around them in a similar way to these, having given themselves over to whoring and gone after strange flesh, are set forth as an example, undergoing judicial punishment of everlasting fire. In the same way, indeed, these dreamers defile the flesh and reject authority and speak evil of esteemed ones. But Michael, the chief messenger, in contending with the devil, when he disputed about the body of Moshe, presumed not to bring against him a blasphemous accusation, but said, Yahweh rebuke you. But these blaspheme that which they do not know, and that which they know naturally, like unreasoning beasts, in these they corrupt themselves. Woe to them, because they have gone in the way of Cain, and gave themselves to the delusion of Balaam for a reward, and perished in the rebellion of Korach. These are rocky reefs in your love feasts, feasting with you, feeding themselves without fear, waterless clouds borne about by the winds, late autumn trees without fruit, twice dead, pulled up by the roots, wild waves of the sea foaming up their own shame, straying stars for whom blackness of darkness is kept forever. And Chanoch, the seventh from Adam, also prophesied of these, saying, See, Yahweh comes with his myriads of set-apart ones, to execute judgment on all, to punish all who are wicked among them concerning all their wicked works which they have committed in a wicked way, and concerning all the harsh words which wicked sinners have spoken against him. These are grumblers, complainers who walk according to their own lusts, and their mouths speak proudly, admiring faces of others for the sake of gain. But you, beloved ones, remember the words spoken before by the emissaries of our Master Yahshua Messiah, because they told you there would be mockers in the last time who would walk according to their own wicked lusts. These are the ones who cause divisions, not having the Spirit. But you, beloved ones, building yourselves up on your most set-apart belief, praying in the set-apart Spirit, keep yourselves in the love of Elohim, looking for the compassion of our Master Yahshua Messiah unto everlasting life. And show compassion towards some who are doubting, but others save with fear, snatching them out of fire, hating even the garment defiled by the flesh. And to him who is able to keep you from stumbling, and to present you blameless before the presence of his esteem with exceeding joy, To the only wise Elohim our Saviour be esteem and greatness and might and authority both now and forever. Amen.
Okay, so a very powerful letter we see here. This is such a well-placed letter before the book of Chazon, and in many ways it's a sobering call to stand and fight the good fight of the belief as we hold firm to the commands of our Elohim, possessing the witness of Yeshua Messiah. It's a very powerful letter, only one chapter, yet it's got so much in it, declaring a loud encouragement as well as a severe warning. You know, it both is a call to true set-apart believers to contend for the true belief, as well as a severe warning against those who are pretending in their belief, and through their lawless living and corrupted lifestyles of mixed worship are simply denying the Master and Elohim of our deliverance. So it really is a chapter that presents a mirror to ask whether we are contending or whether we are pretending, you know. And so in his introduction, Yehudah makes it clear to who his audience is. His audience is the called, set-apart ones and preserved ones by our Master and Elohim. He felt it extremely necessary to write this letter to believers and urge the believers to earnestly contend for the belief that was once delivered to the set-apart ones. This letter is so important still to us today as set-apart believers, making sure that we also, like them, were called back then to be contending for the true belief. And so when we look at this, we see so many people today have been drawn away. We see prophesied in Scripture, the falling away before the lawless one is revealed. So there's a lot of people being drawn away with the delusion of lawlessness and are not contending as true believers should, because people get tired. You think of contending, one of the images I get in my head is in a boxing ring, and you know, you've got the two boxes and you hear ting, ting, and it's got a next round, you go, and people are like, I don't have any more, I can't go another round, and they give up. They're simply pretending in obedience and putting on a show, so to speak. It's almost like, you know, you get I'm not into hitting each other, okay, but you get the professional fights, and then you get the kind of show things, you know. Don't want to mention things, but you'll know what I'm talking about, where it looks like if somebody got one smack, like they say, you'd be out for days. But no, they carry on for hours, and it's a big show before people. So they're pretending. And this is what a lot of people are doing in the belief. They're pretending to be fighting, but they're not actually fighting. They're putting on a show. And so many are putting on this outward show, and they do that by following theological traditions of man that they've set aside their need to obey the commands of Elohim, because their theologies look better, feel better for them in the flesh. You know, just to highlight the difference between a contender and a pretender, the Merriam-Webster's dictionary defines a pretender as follows: one who lays claim to something, specifically a claimant to a throne who has no just title, and one who makes a false and hypocritical show. To pretend is also understood and defined as giving a false appearance of being, possessing, or performing, or to make believe or feign. To feign means to give a false appearance and to assert as if it is true, or to claim or represent or assert falsely. So, I mean, it's pretty standard, but I'm giving you an expanded dictionary explanation to help you understand. I believe there are a lot of people pretending, giving false appearance, like the religious Pharisees of the day, cleaning the outside of the dish, but inside there's no life. The refusal to submit to the Torah of Elohim the way it is commanded to be done nullifies any assumed witness of Yeshua Messiah. And this I'm highlighting now in terms of Yehudah writing to set apart believers, and he said, among you there are some that are pretending. So let's move away from what we've came out from, because that is an aspect, but let's talk about in the body. Are there some pretenders in the body? Pretending to really keep the Sabbath and the feast, pretending to really obey, not guarding the pattern, not guarding the structure in the body, but yet carrying on as if they're fighting the good fight. Yehudah introduces himself as a servant of Yeshua Messiah. And this in itself, for most people don't realize, here was the half-brother of Messiah. Obviously half-brother because, he was not immaculately conceived. He was from Yosef and Miriam. So you've got a powerful witness of the true servant heart of Yehudah, who was the half-brother of our master in the flesh. He didn't try to use his physical lineage to say, hey guys, I grew up with him, I watched my big brother doing things. He didn't try and use that. He says, I'm a servant. He grew up as a younger brother of Messiah, would have eaten with him, possibly even played with him. He might not even have initially believed that his brother was Messiah as he was growing up as a younger brother before him. We're told in the letters of Yoḥanan and Marcos that the brothers of Messiah did not believe in him. In fact, it says in Yoḥanan 7, verse 5, his brothers did not believe in him. In Marcos 3, verse 21, it says, when his relatives heard about this, they went out to seize him, for they said, he's out of his mind. At some stage, the true revelation of Yeshua Messiah became a reality and hit this half-brother hard. And while he might not have once believed who his older brother was, he was now making this urgent appeal as a servant of Yeshua for the true called, set-apart ones to contend for the belief, earnestly contend for the belief. A true humble servant of Yeshua Messiah, Yehudah, was calling for obedience in action, or as we see in Scripture, Shaul often writes, belief obedience, This is a vital role for any servant of Messiah. True servants contend, they don't pretend. And the Greek word for servant, doulos, equivalent to the Hebrew eved, Shaul called himself a servant of Yahweh. Yaakov called himself a servant of Yahweh. Shimon Kefa called himself a servant and emissary of Yeshua Messiah. Yehudah called himself a servant of Yeshua Messiah. Sorry, I said a servant of Yahweh, but Yeshua is Yahweh, our Savior. So some of those might technically say, okay, so you know where I'm talking. Shaul told Timotheus the following in his second letter: suffer hardship with us as a good soldier of Yeshua Messiah. No one serving as a soldier gets involved in the civilian affairs or in the affairs of this life in order to please only him who enlisted him as a soldier. And if anyone competes in a game, he's not crowned unless he competes according to the rules. In other words, the crown of life that we are running toward, if we are not competing according to the rules, we'll never receive that complete deliverance. A good and trustworthy, faithful servant is a good soldier of Messiah and seeks to please only him as our commander. And so we are to be servants that are guarding the witness of our master. And here in verse 3, when he says, I felt it necessary to write to you, urging you. I'm putting that, when you think of urge, it's like urging you. Come on, get with it. The Greek word for urging is parakaleo, which means call near or invite or encourage or appeal or help or urge or give comfort. Parakaleo is used in a variety of forms. It's used in the Greek text when summoning someone to action that's required. It's also used to beseech another for an urgent response to help. It's used to exhort or to encourage in the context of, giving soldiers going into battle some much needed pep talk. It's used to comfort and encourage in times of hardship and grief. Now, parakaleo comes from para, which is from, beside, or the side of, and kaleo, which means to call or call out or invited or summoned. So what we take note of here is that the value of hearing the voice and the call of our master in Elohim, on how valuable it is for every single one of us to be encouraged daily by one of us, each other, as we remind one another of the comfort and strength of our master as we guard set apartness. It's so critical that, from the idea is from being called out, or from the called out ones. We are to be exhorting one another, encouraging, building up one another, so that we're not letting the shield of belief go down, but we're strengthening and saying, hey, come on, you can do it, we can do it. Because when you encourage somebody else, something inside you also gets strengthened. And it's from the word kaleo that we get the Greek word ecclesia, which means assembly or congregation. coming from ek, which means from out of, and kaleo, called in. So from out, you're invited. You're part of the assembly. So let's encourage, come on, let's get together. Let's do this together. It's a rallying of the troops for service. The Greek word for earnestly contend is epagonizomai. It means to contend with or earnestly contend, coming from epi, which is upon, about, or over, and agonizomai, which means to contend for a prize, to struggle, to labor earnestly. And this root word agonizomai is translated as fight in 1 Timothy 6 verse 12 when it says, fight the good fight of the belief, lay hold on an everlasting life, to which you were also called and have confessed the good confession before many witnesses. You know, in his first letter, Timotheus tells Shaul to flee all evil. Shaul tells Timotheus to flee all evil, to pursue set apartness, and to fight the good fight of the belief, and be trustworthy to the end. In other words, keep contending. Don't give up. Language that Shaul was using here, he would typically apply to the imagery of athletes and soldiers of his day. Much necessary encouragement was needed for them. And we get our English word from this Greek word. We get the English word agonize. Now, metaphorically, it means to contend or struggle with difficulties or dangers and endeavor with strenuous zeal. In other words, look, it sounds like a lot of work, and it is. That's what agonizing over things is. It takes work, it takes effort, it's very draining, but we got to pursue it, we got to keep going. Agonizomai is actually translated as strive, when our master says, strive to enter through the narrow gate, because many, I say to you, shall not seek to enter in and shall not be able. In other words, it's a hard-pressed way. It's narrow. But you've got to strive, you've got to contend to get in that way and stay in that way. Most people couldn't care less. It's too much work. It's too much effort. To earnestly contend implies the action of striving and asserting oneself in the truth, fighting the good fight of the belief, being like Yehuḍah, who knows the Torah, knows the history. How are you ever going to know the Torah and the history if you're never meditating on it? In verse 4, Yehudah tells us that men had slipped in, certain men had slipped into the set-apart ones, and they'd perverted the truth. They perverted the favor of Elohim for indecency. And in doing so, they deny the only one true master in Elohim. And the picture that's given here of people slipping in and perverting the truth is a picture of a parable that our master also gives in a sense of the wheat and the darnel growing up together. While men slept, an enemy came and did this. And the Greek word for wicked ones is asebis, which means impious, destitute of reverential awe toward Elohim, or without regard for belief and practice of set apartness, without fear and reverence of Elohim. And, you know, this word does not necessarily mean irreligious, but it rather speaks of one who actively practices the opposite of what Elohim commands. So it's like deliberately knowing the truth, but I won't do it. And men had slipped in and they're doing this and they're perverting the favor. So we're just under grace, so we can do what we want. When we stop and consider what this describes, you know, this is what we see happening today. You know, people are actually, they are practicing the opposite of the true fear of Elohim. The Torah teaches us to fear Elohim, and it teaches us to guard all his commands. When we understand what that means, people don't care anymore for his commands today. And what they've perverted, in verse 4, he says they've perverted the favor of Elohim. To pervert means to change, to remove. That's the Greek word. It comes from the Greek word metatemi, which means to transfer, to change, to remove. And it's taking away that which is pure and true and bringing in something that's false. We know that favor or grace is only extended on the basis of covenant relationship. And what we see here is if we don't endure with obedience in reverent fear of our master, we're just given over to indecency and licentiousness, if you will. You know, the Greek word for indecency is asalgia, which is sensuality or licentiousness. And the dictionary definitions for those, licentiousness means lacking legal or moral restraint, disregard sexual restraint, disregard for strict rules of correctness. Wow. You're too strict. No, you're licentious. Sensuality means gratification of the senses or indulgences of the appetite, devoted or preoccupied with the senses or appetites, deficient in moral, spiritual, or intellectual interests. How many times have you found yourself deficient in the intellectual interest of spiritual matters? That is to say, if you've been found with a deficiency of the need to be intellectually engaged in Scripture and the study and meditation thereof, you may be given over to sensuality and the gratification of the flesh. If this is the case, sober up quickly, as Shaul warns. The night is far advanced. It's time to wake up. Many people profess to know Elohim, as Shaul writes to Titus, but in works they deny him, being abominable, disobedient, unable for any good work. I mean, that's a serious thing. You know, one of the things that he warns Timotheus about those who have a form of reverence but deny its power. So they're putting on a show. He says, turn away from these. In other words, if you're associating people that are, you're not claiming to be believers, there's one thing about reaching people of this world that we are to be a light to. As Messiah went and ate with the sinners and the religious lot said, oh, look, he's eating. He didn't do what they were doing, but he was reaching them. But to those who claimed to be the religious ones, he rebuked them. And he didn't take part with them. Turn away from pretenders is what Shaul was basically telling Timotheus. Turn away from those that are putting on a show. And this is how you will know the spirit of Elohim, the one that confesses Messiah has come in the flesh. If you're going to start getting into debates over genealogies and who Messiah is, then you must know, turn away. You're going to waste your time and energy. Now, if somebody doesn't know and they're seeking, teach them. But if somebody is adamant that Yeshua is not Yahweh, our Savior, turn away from them. We need to be on guard against possessing the witness of our Master, because a lot of people have crept in. They blaspheme that which they do not know. The problem is, so many people are using duality or Trinity, etc., and they're blaspheming Yahweh. And Yehudah gives a severe woe to those who are pretending. Now, a pretender's not going out and saying, I'm pretending, because maybe they believe what they believe, but they are carrying on and not submitting to the clear standard of set-apartness. And he likens pretenders to those who have gone in the way of Cain. Cain is the first one to commit murder in Scripture. Going in the way of Cain is a warning to those who run after the things of the flesh and are not walking according to the Spirit. Remember, he was a hunter, you know, where Hevel was a keeper of the sheep. Took a lot of work to still do that. But it's a difference of Hevel. Cain was Cain was a tiller of the ground, yes. Okay, and Hevel was a keeper of sheep. Both take a lot of work. But when Cain's offering was not accepted, it's because the heart behind it. Okay? And so we understand here, going the way of Cain is thinking, okay, I've done something, I deserve something. Those that have given themselves to the delusion of Bilam, we've spoken about Bilam, and I think we're still going to get to Bilam, aren't we? Yes, in the next couple of weeks. Next week. Okay? We know Bilam is the one who taught Balak how to creep into Israel, because, you know, he didn't put a curse on them, but he certainly said, this is how you can creep in. Use the woman. Get them, lure them away and corrupt them with your false practices, you know. Pretenders are likened to those who have perished in the rebellion of Korah. We've spoken about Korah last week and the week before. The bottom line, when we look at this letter that Yehudah is giving us here, pretenders are not contenders, because pretenders complain and grumble. We've dealt a lot with grumbling. Now, how do we contend for the belief? At the end of this letter, he gives very clear instructions on how one contends. In other words, this is the pep talk on how to get in the ring and fight, the good fight of the belief. And the first part is to build yourself up in the most set-apart belief. If you're not spending time in the Word, How can you be built up as a living stone that can offer proper praise to our Master? We need to be people that are being built up on the word, and we're building one another up so that we can be a strengthened body that is able to stand and fight the good fight. We are to be praying in the Spirit, and I want to touch on this because many have perverted this idea of praying in the Spirit to some weird religious show that is not honoring the Master at all. We are told in verse 19 that the mockers who cause division do not have the Spirit. And so we recognize that pretenders do not have the Spirit of Elohim. They have a spirit of the anti-Messiah. Yoḥanan Aleph chapter 4, verse 1 to 6 tells us to not believe every spirit, but to prove the spirits, because many false prophets have gone into the world, and by this we know the Spirit of Elohim. That every spirit that confesses Yeshua Messiah has come in the flesh is of Elohim, and that every spirit that does not confess that Yeshua Messiah has come in the flesh is not of Elohim, and is the spirit of the anti-Messiah, and is coming, and already is in the world. You are of Elohim, little children, and have overcome them, because he who is in you is greater than he who is in the world. They are of the world, therefore they speak as of the world, and the world hears them. We are of Elohim. The one knowing Elohim hears us. He who is not of Elohim does not hear us. By this we know the spirit of the truth and the spirit of the delusion. Now again, Yoḥanan was writing to people at the time who would have physically witnessed Messiah in the flesh in his day. So to confess that Yeshua Messiah has come in the flesh of Elohim is a confession that Yahweh, our Savior, is, as prophesied, the Son that's born unto us, that is our Father and our wondrous Savior and everlasting King. And so when I think about these words of 1 John, it's again, the spirit of the anti-Messiah and the spirit of the Messiah is what's actually at battle at the moment, in a battle. It's a battle for life. And when we think of this, the anti-Messiah spirit can put a big show on. Prayer is communicating with Yahweh. We've often summarized it in the best way to make it understandable as that praying is talking to Yahweh, prophesying is speaking about it. So when we are praying to Yahweh, we are praying directly to him. We're talking to him. Prophesying, we're speaking about him. So to pray in the Spirit is not a limitation to a praying in foreign tongues, which a lot of people tend to interpret. That's not praying in the Spirit, okay? It's a reference to a proper means of talking to our Master, being ready to present all praise, petition, and requests with thanksgiving, and being ready to hear what the Spirit is saying. And as witnessed through his word and responding directly through obeying what he instructs and commands. We are to walk according to the Spirit and not according to the flesh. This simply means we are to be walking according to the clear pattern as given to us in the word, which comes from above, and not according to the corrupted pattern of man that has set aside the Torah of Elohim and doing whatever is right in their own eyes. When we walk according to the Spirit, we do what is right in the eyes of Yahweh, as we walk according to his word. Therefore, when Yehudah is saying praying in the Spirit, it's to pray according to his pattern, putting on the proper seeking of Yahweh and his righteousness as a priority in our lives, seeking his direction, his wisdom, his understanding, in order that his Torah can be the light that lights our path. That's after being built up in the belief, praying in the Spirit, seeking him with your all, and then, third step, keep yourself in the love of Elohim. To love Elohim is to guard his commands. So this is clear instructions of how you contend. Get in the word, pray the word, if you will, pray, to talk to him, have a relationship with him, and keep yourself in that love, in obedience. Looking for the compassion of our Master. Because only when you follow those three things first can your eyes be fixed on the one you're to be looking to. Looking for the compassion, because we know these hard days will be ended soon, but we don't take our eyes off of our Master. And in doing so, when we're equipped looking to him for compassion, Shaul gives this thing about we who have compassion, show compassion, so that you can have compassion on others that are doubting, because we're there to build one another up. So we have this cycle of building one another up, and what equips us to build others up. We are to be looking for the compassion of our Master, so that when we get that compassion, we're able to extend that compassion to those who are doubting so that they can get strengthened. And so we build the body up. And by doing that, we begin to save others with fear by snatching them out of the fire, helping them realize you were close to death. We don't want to be like these pretenders that are described here as rocky reefs, as waterless clouds. You know, a cloud without water is a useless cloud, basically, because it's got no use. There's no nourishment in it. Might be a bit of shade for a little while, but there's no substance in what a cloud should bring forth in the rains that come to bring produce from the earth. These that are feasting as pretenders are reckoned as twice dead, which highlights that they have no part of the first resurrection, because the second death has power over them, because it's appointed for all men to die once. So therefore, we who are part of the first resurrection, the second death at judgment, will have no power over us. So if we are in Messiah and are raised with him and resurrected and transformed when he comes again with the renewed bodies, we will not be twice dead. Does that make sense? And one of the things, the seventh thing that he gives here in contending for the belief is hating garments defiled by the flesh. This is one of the biggest stumbling blocks for so many people today. They don't hate that which is false. But when you hate something, you don't want to touch it. You don't want to engage in it. You don't want to taste it. Hating will certainly cause you to want to help people not do what you hate. People you love, people you care about in the body. When compromise is easily tolerated, contending earnestly for the belief will diminish. Because then, yeah, I know it's not nice to do that, but I suppose it's okay. No, if you hate something, we ought to hate what Yahweh hates. And go read Mishle, the things that Yahweh hates. And I think a lot of people don't hate that which defiles the flesh. And rather they want to feed the flesh for a moment. You know, let love be without hypocrisy, Shaul reminds us in Romans. Shrink from what is wicked, cling to what is good. I think a lot of people are actually shrinking from what is good and clinging to what is wicked. What we look here at this passage of Yehudah, when we look at it, we are given a summary here of a warning against pretending, an encouragement for contending, and what to be on the lookout for, how we are to contend in this belief according to the word so that we don't deny the master, but we confess him before many witnesses. Any thoughts on this passage? I encourage you to spend time meditating on these words over and over and over. It's a short little letter of 30-odd verses, but really, the more that you read it and just stop and think, and even do your Greek word searches, if you will, and really see that, you know, I think there's so much to glean from this, especially a letter that is almost like the entrance into the revelation of Messiah that Yoḥanan is given. Because only when we're truly contending will we be able to understand the revelation. There's one more passage we're going to go through today. I didn't go in chronological order, but we're going to look at Yoḥanan 3, verse 10 to 21. Okay.
Yehoshua answered and said to him, Are you the teacher of Israel and do not know this? Truly, truly, I say to you, we speak what we know and witness what we have seen, and you do not receive our witness. If you do not believe when I speak to you about earthly matters, how are you going to believe when I speak to you about heavenly matters? And no one has gone up into the heavens except he who came down from the heaven, the Son of Adam. And as Moshe lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so the Son of Adam has to be lifted up, so that whoever is believing in him should not perish but possess everlasting life. For Elohim so loved the world that he gave his only brought forth Son, so that everyone who believes in him should not perish but possess everlasting life. For Elohim did not send his Son into the world to judge the world, but that the world through him might be saved. He who believes in him is not judged, but he who does not believe is judged already, because he has not believed in the name of the only brought forth Son of Elohim. And this is the judgment, that the light has come into the world, and men loved the darkness rather than the light, for their works were wicked. For everyone who is practicing evil matters hates the light and does not come to the light, lest his works should be exposed. But the one doing the truth comes to the light, so that his works are clearly seen, that they have been wrought in Elohim.
We just spoke there about hating the garments defiled by the flesh, and here we see again in this passage that those who hate the light, the ones that are walking in darkness. So it goes hand in hand. We who are walking in the light, we should hate that which is in darkness, you know. And when we look at this passage, reading it in line with what we read in the Torah, where Messiah said, just as Moshe lifted up pole in the wilderness, so the Son of Adam has to be lifted up. And we see in prophecy, who is the one that goes up except the one that came down? So he was saying, I'm the one that came to be lifted up. And if you don't believe me, then you are walking in darkness. But here he is, the light of the world that's brought the light, and now therefore we should possess this witness, and we should earnestly contend the belief, you know. So today we are looking at the Torah portion that started off with the red heifer. We looked at the rock that was struck and the serpent that was put on a pole and lifted, or the bronze serpent. And then we looked at Yiftach and a commitment to guarding one's word and witness of our master. And then Yehudah and the warning against pretending and the encouragement to contend. And our master making it clear that he is the one who was lifted up so that we could have the ability to walk in the light of life and no longer be in darkness. And so therefore the mirror of the word must present to us the clear question, am I contending or am I pretending? You know? And we are to be contending as we encourage one another each and every day. Any thoughts on today's passages? Anybody want to add anything? Everyone good? Okay. A couple of moments. Anybody online would like to share? I'm sure if you are, you're typing away. I'll give you a moment. Renee, anything you'd like to say? Your fingers are warmed up by lunchtime. Okay, Joshua just sent one. Okay, it was 2:30, so on WhatsApp, and just said, Shalom, Shalom, Craig. To me, the assembly is my family rather than my physical relatives. Therefore, I expect the assembly, my spiritual family, to remain close to me, even if there is a death within my immediate household. I hope I'm not misinterpreting Mark 3:34-35, which states that anyone who does the will of my Elohim is my brother, sister, my mother. You know, not at all. We are his family. And this is who we are. We are a spiritual house being built up in our master. And we come together each week and we celebrate the We Are family. But we also realize that there are still physical relationships that we have in this world that we certainly don't throw away. I mean, we look at the pattern of Abraham, that he had other children that he gave gifts to while he lived. And so it wasn't something, I mean, but certainly in terms of a covenant relationship, you're 100% right. We are a family in the master, and we've got to have that mindset, you know. And I'm not really sure what else you were asking. Sorry? Said, to me, the assembly is my family rather than my physical relatives. Therefore, I expect the assembly, my spiritual family, to remain close to me, even if there is a death within my immediate household. I hope I'm not misinterpreting Mark, which states that anyone who does the will of Elohim is my brother, sister, and mother. This is when Messiah was teaching the crowds in a house, and it was so full, and his mother and his brothers were outside, and they said, hey, you know, your mother and brothers are outside. And he said, no, who's my mother and my brothers? And he pointed to those here. These are my mother and brothers, those doing the will of the Father. So he was just giving a witness of this is what true family is. He wasn't neglecting the fact that he had mothers and brothers and things like that. So it's not...
It's not in light of the burying your family members when they die in your house.
Yes.
When you talked about
Yes.
water for cleansing.
Yeah.
Obviously, you have a certain responsibility
Yes.
for your direct family.
Yes. Yeah, there is a responsibility. If somebody in your direct family, I mean, I do think that there's still that responsibility that we should uphold, but we don't do the practices of the nations when it comes to taking care of close relatives when they pass on. Yeah.
Is it also support?
Yes.
None, family members, it does.
Yes.
That kind of thing.
Yes.
You don't just write them off because they are not.
No. No, when one part suffers, we all suffer, you know, and we comfort each other. So when somebody is facing a loss in their physical family, we as a spiritual family, certainly we are to be there to comfort, to encourage.
She's unbelieving family.
Yes. Okay.
Also emotional toll.
Yes. Yes. When your unbelieving family dies, there's an emotional toll where you expect your spiritual family to come and encourage you. That's what you say. Yes. Is that what you thought you were saying? Oh, well, Joshua, if I'm getting this wrong, type quickly because we're almost done. But I hope that answers. I mean,
I was just thinking about you stuff and how obviously you always said if you don't destroy your enemies, there will be pricks in your eyes and thorns in your flesh, which is what happened. Israel started mixing with the nations, and that's why the enemy kept infiltrating and taking land which Yahweh gave them. I mean, we talk about this now with the Israel, the physical land now being fought over by all the nations, and Palestine saying it's theirs, and I mean it's an age-old battle.
yeah.
But Yahweh said in the prophets, I gave you an inheritance, and you sneered at it and gave it away.
Yeah.
So this is what happened because Israel, if you look at Shophetim 10, they served the Baals, and Yahweh said, I'm not going to help you anymore because this is what you're doing. He said he was going to use the nations to
discipline.
Yeah. So they're going to come and you're supposed to destroy them. If you let them in, they're going to
destroy you.
Make claim on the land again.
Yeah.
But I mean, because of Yehuɗah's faith, he was still in the land. He can say, no, but Yahweh gave me this land.
Yeah.
I have a right to it.
Yes.
It's before he divorced them all completely, I guess. You know what I mean? But for me, it was just that. I mean, obviously the leaders were so mixed with the nations that they felt like, well, you know, they had no faith anymore to say, yes, but Yahweh can help us. He gave us this land. We have a right to it. He can fight with us. They claimed that he gave it, but he had to have that belief.
Yes.
And that's why I think he made a vow, because, I mean, we're all just human. Sometimes you can think, okay, well, I'm alone in this land. Everyone else is serving the Baals anyway. I have no right to say to Yahweh, help me fight and win, because everyone else is worshipping anyway they want to anyway. But his faith said, I promise, just be with me. Let me, let's do this. Take back what you gave us in the first place. So it's like you talked about, the plans, having a plan and fighting for it. You know, he could have just said, well, Yahweh gave it to us. He must just wave his wand. You know what people want sometimes. But he said, okay, no, well, let's go fight. We have a claim to it. Even though the nation is whoring away and walking away from Yahweh, he said he doesn't even want to help them anymore because they don't serve him like they're supposed to. I mean, it was a slow, slippery slope where in the end, like all the judges, you know what I mean? It's like there were times when there was peace when people served him, but there was times when he let the nations come in and take
because they didn't serve him
what he gave them, because they were disobedient.
Okay, let's just carry on here with Joshua. I'm referring specially to Guguletu and the kids as family, as I'm not expecting any other support but my family, the assembly. So, okay, if something had to happen to the family, that's what he's saying. Well, look, I think anything in the body, whenever we can encourage and help one another, certainly there is that. But what we do say, what we are saying in the greater context, Colleen was just saying at lunch, how far we have been removed from what they did back in the day to what's done now in terms of, when now there's and I know the laws of the land, you're not allowed to just go and bury somebody. You have to use a funeral service and things like that. So there are laws, and for good reason in a sense, because it keeps you don't want diseases and things and everything. But obviously the customary way of doing things is the bodies of a family would be done directly by the immediate family as quickly as possible. But then any other mourning and comforting, encouragement and compassion and things that are shown by others would be done over a period of time. But it's not this traditional, now everybody must come in and have this expensive funeral. That's what we're saying, is we've been so far removed from what scripturally is about burial and getting somebody burial and then comforting and encouraging those, versus now what's become quite an industry.
Because having a death in the family is a natural thing that's going to happen
Yes.
to all of us.
Yeah.
So, if he's like saying, he wants his spiritual family to help Google it, to bury him, you can, obviously, the word just says, okay, you're unclean for a day.
Yeah.
Or the one who touches the ashes.
Yeah.
So there is a procedure.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that you cut off for
No.
You can be unclean. There's nothing
No.
wrong with that.
Yes, yeah.
It is for a certain specific purpose.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think what I understand what Joshua is saying is, obviously if something happens to any of us, that we are there to
Do the right
assist and assist with the procedures, and because sometimes people just don't know what to do, or they don't have the means to do, because that's what, and we can be there to assist one another. I think that goes for all of us, and the reality of a case of people can only assist where they can assist in a family, and it's so yeah, and Yahweh always provides the means within a body that's obedient, and how that comes together, that's trust in Yahweh. Yeah. Okay, and Renee, and if you bury a pet in the garden, unclean.
It's human remains.
Okay, we're talking about human remains here that this Torah is talking about today, so we're not going to get into pets at the moment. Okay.
Did you bury a pet?
All right.
No.
Okay, so look, I encourage you all to keep asking the questions. You're welcome to send emails, WhatsApps, or even ask one another and encourage one another. But yeah, we've been through our readings for now, and let's just keep our eyes fixed on our Master. And when we come to sessions like this and there's lots of questions being raised, don't stop thinking about those things.
Pet would be an unclean animal.
Yes.
Which is you unclean until evening.
Yeah. Yes.
Unclean
Yeah.
animal.
No.
Sprinkling and
No,
it's
there's
not a human.
no.
Yeah.
I also just want to touch on. Yeah. No, we won't touch on that. I said I'll answer him later. That's it's another topic, and I didn't want to go too far off. Carol is saying, if we are pretending, we'll never be able to truly contend, since it's Yahweh who helps us and strengthens us. We are more than overcomers in him who loves us. Praise Yah. Okay. Thank you for that encouraging note as we say shalom, shalom, and close in prayer. Master Yahweh, we bless you and we thank you that we can be immersed in your word. We thank you for your Shabbat that continues to strengthen us, and even as there may be many questions being raised in our hearts, and I pray that they would not stop, but rather over time they would be perfectly answered by you, according to your word and your spirit that leads and directs us as a family, being knit together in your perfect design. And our heart's desire is that we continue to grow in understanding and the clarity of your word, so that we can present the facts just as Yehuḍah did, very clearly and precisely, contending for the belief every single day, putting our complete trust in you and making our commitment to you firm to the end as we run this race with endurance. And we thank you for giving us a life that can serve you in complete set apartness through your cleansing, through your washing of our lives, through your word and the blood that you shed for us, that we can praise you and celebrate you and give you all the esteem in the name of Yahushua, our Messiah. Amen and amen.